Hi, and welcome to this Mental Health Awareness Week seminar on mental health in the built environment. Thanks very much for joining us. This is a webinar with Welltek, and we've got Emma Jenkins here from Welltek and Office Blueprint to talk to us. Hi Emma, you're right?
Hello, I'm good, thanks Georgia, yes. Thank you for having us.
Good. Can I just check that everybody can hear the audio? Can you just give us a comment in the chat box if you can hear? Excellent. Thanks very much. That's great. This is a joint seminar, as I say. Oh, great. Everyone's saying yes, thank you. Nice to see you all. Hi. This is a joint webinar with Welltek and myself. I'm Georgia Elliott-Smith from Element 4. Element 4 is a sustainability consultancy, and we deliver environmental and social sustainability services for our clients in the built environment, predominantly in commercial offices, but also in across the whole property sector, helping businesses to become more sustainable and take better care of people and planet. So this is just a brilliant topic for us, and I've previously done some work with Emma and her fantastic team at Welltek and their beautiful showroom in Clerkenwell. So hi Emma, how are you?
I'm good, thank you. Yes, very good. Yeah. We had a few technical issues, unfortunately, my side, so that's why we were a couple of minutes late, but it all seems to be working now.
I think it's working fine now. I think got away with it. I think all of this stuff about lockdown, it's all just trying to get used to the technology, isn't it? And if the technology lets you down at the last second, it can be quite stressful, which is topical, isn't it?
Yes, it is.
It's mental health awareness seminar. Yeah. Right. So, do you want to give us a quick introduction to yourself and who you are and what you do?
Yes, definitely. So I'm Emma Jenkins, as Georgia said. Hello, everybody. I'm one of the directors of Welltek, and we are a business all about promoting employee well-being, whether that's in offices, in public places, generally employee well-being. So if you could move to my product slide, please, Georgia. Georgia's in control here of the slides. That would be fantastic. So very, very quick introduction to the product portfolio. Effectively, we help all different types of well-being, and we're looking at things like noise pollution. So we are one of the largest distributors in the world of the framery pod. So that helps people with concentration, obviously, in the office. And I think a lot of us could appreciate even the framery O booth, which is a phone booth. How many of us would have liked to have had one of those at home over the past 8 to 10 weeks? So we are seeing a bit of an increase now in the demand for these at home. Also, it could be something that helps people actually go back to work following lockdown, because of course it could help with the social distancing. So then there's a whole range of pods from Framery, 3 basic sizes. And then we're also helping people, so that kind of helps with noise pollution. And then if you look across to the right with light cognitive, that helps with poor lighting in offices mainly. So it's a circadian lighting. It helps mimic natural lighting, which it can be a real problem in offices. And then the bottom row, we start looking at things like rest and recovery. So there's a product I'll talk a little bit more about in a minute from a company called Look Industries, which helps people relax. We've helped the NHS with that. We'll talk about in a minute. And then yes, that's been really good. And then we're also helping with effectively air pollution. So there's a couple of products here. First is the Nava Living Wall, which is a self-watering, amazing, beautiful living wall, which also acts as a room divider, and it has lighting. It's won lots of awards for its appearance and technology. And then most recently, we've started to work with another Finnish company. Most of these products are Finnish. A product called Airo, and I will briefly touch on that in a minute as well. And then just finally on that side was the Go Sleep. So it's basically a sleep pod, which is not really originally designed just for airports, but it's starting to become much more popular even for offices and hospitals, which I'll obviously touch on. So thank you.
Yeah.
So I'm not going to go into huge amounts of detail here, but just to say that it is a new kind of air purifier from Finland, and it's web-based, so you can scale it all the way up to however many rooms you have in an office or in a commercial environment, and you can then, through a traffic light system, very easily see which rooms have problems with the air. And I think, again, this is quite topical at the moment. Viruses tend to travel through the air on particles, so you need to be able to remove all those particles from your air in order to be healthy, have clean air. So there's quite a lot of studies going on about this at the moment, but you've probably read about the fact that this virus that we're all living with, it can remain viable in aerosol form for up to 3 hours. So this is something that we're seeing a lot more interest in now. We're starting to work with doctors and dentists and that kind of thing. So quite interesting. Please get in touch, obviously, if you'd like any more information on any of those products. And then finally, thank you, Georgia. Next slide. From me, I'd just like to talk about our NHS experience. So we saw quite early on in the pandemic, we kind of looked around and thought, well, what can we do? I think everyone felt, what can we do? You feel a little bit helpless, don't you? And all of our NHS heroes just doing a tremendous job. So we thought, well, we have some products that could help them. So we started to donate some of the products. And the main two we actually have been lending is the NAP, which is the neuron activation pod, which you can see that chap relaxing in, the orange one, and the Wave, which is the same technology actually, but it's just in a much smaller form, and it tends to be more for the domestic market. But we had some of these and we thought we may as well actually get them used. So you can see a lady top right enjoying the Wave. Both of those products have something called neurosonic technology inside, which is very low energy vibrations, and that's proven to help people relax and recover. So just 10-minute sessions, you get a lot more than just kind of lying down for 10 minutes. So they've been very well received, as you can imagine, and we've had some very happy doctors and nurses using them. And not just, all the staff in the hospital have benefited. And then most recently, some of the hospitals, initially Nottingham University Hospital, have started to actually buy the sleep pods. And you can see there some doctors there sitting in happy doctors who can completely lie down, close the lid over and actually get some zen,
this technology
get some sleep.
Free during coronavirus.
Yeah, we've lent them. Yeah, so exactly. So a couple of hospitals in London, initially Whipps Cross, and then I cannot remember the name of the other hospital in London, but then Nottingham University Hospital, we'd lent them the Wave as well, and they also have started to buy the sleep pods. So and we are still interested in helping out as much as we can, or if people have a favourite local hospital, we're happy to sort of look at,
I think that's
maybe helping.
Yeah, I mean, and it's
ways
such a lovely connection to Mental Health Awareness Week, because as we've discussed previously, the theme of the week this year is kindness. And I think, in this situation that we're in at the moment, I think it's so easy to feel isolated as well as being physically isolated. And when we're so caught up in our stresses, it's very hard, isn't it, to focus on what's going on outside without all the negativity coming in. And actually, but we have seen some incredible instances of kindness in this pandemic. It's been wonderful.
Absolutely. No, it's been amazing. It was quite overwhelming, actually, their reaction. So, but understandably, they have been, I think, inundated, which has been amazing, by offers of help. So that's great. Right. Well, I'm going to mute myself now.
Absolutely.
But I'll be on.
Thanks very much,
I think, Q&A at the end,
and we'll come back to you later.
Questions specific for Welltek.
Thank
you very much.
So
thanks. Okay.
That's a little intro to who Welltek are and Emma. And now I want to take you through my main presentation, which is all to do with mental health and the built environment. And I want to be really clear about the scope of this presentation. There is obviously a huge amount that can be done operationally and with managers. And I recently put a post on LinkedIn about the 10 steps to a happy workplace, which is all to do with the way in which organisations interact on a personal level with their staff, and to do with trust and management practices and freedom in the workplace and things like that. But this presentation specifically is for built environment professionals to look at what we can do, looking just at the built environment, to support better mental health for the people within the buildings. Because we know that around 90%, several studies have shown that around 90% of our time is spent indoors. And actually for most of us at the moment, that's even more than 90%. I mean, I go, even being a wellbeing expert, I can easily go a whole day without setting foot outside during lockdown. And so this is something that we really need to bring back into focus, is how we can take care of our mental health, particularly in the current situation. So before I get fully cracking with the presentation, I just want to draw your attention to a few polls that we're doing, because I want this to be as interactive as possible. If you look at the bottom of your screen, you should have access to a place to post some questions. So please do ask me any questions you like. I'll try and get to answer the questions as I go through. We'll have some time at the end as well to spend answering some questions. Of course, you can connect with me on LinkedIn and ask me the questions direct if I don't get around to your question here. There are also some polls as well that we want to ask you to vote in. So if you could please take a look at the bottom at the polls. If you could look at the first question, please, that would be really brilliant, which is, do you think that your office environment supports your mental health and development? So do you think your office environment supports your mental health at the moment? So while you are voting on that, I'm going to kick off with some, so please forgive, the questions are very generic. There's no right or wrong, obviously. I just want to take the temperature of how people are feeling at the moment with their office environments. So on this first slide, you can see a whole bunch of the tools that we use within the built environment for designing better workspaces. On the left-hand side, we've got the environmental standards, which have been around. So BREEAM was the first environmental standard for buildings internationally. It was released in 1990, so it's been with us for a very long time. And then hot on its heels, a few years later, came LEED, which is a US standard, and then SCAR, which is the RICS standard for fit-out projects. But those three standards primarily focus on environmental benefits. So looking at reduced energy consumption, looking at materials procurement and making sure we don't bring pollution into the space. And there are aspects within those standards that look at health, physical health of the occupant. But in 2014, the WELL building standard was released, and that was the first standard internationally that focused purely on the occupant experience of the built environment and how buildings interact with people's health, so that we then have a tool that allows us to design and operate buildings in a way which promotes better health and well-being. And again, hot on the heels of that came Fitwell, which is a different standard, a lot less technical. So some people are saying that they can't see the box. If you scroll down to the bottom, you should be able to see the polls. So let me know if you can't see, and I'll come back to that later. But the human health standards at the moment, so Fitwell was released in 2017, a lot less technical, and then BCO Wellness Matters, which is not a certification standard, but it's the BCO's set of guidelines and a roadmap really that includes all of the things that are within WELL and Fitwell as guidelines for UK office builders, designers and operators. So you can see it's really part of the zeitgeist. You know, at the moment we are much more aware of mental health than we ever have been before, and events like this week help to promote that and destigmatize this conversation. Just looking as well at why people should think about designing health into buildings rather than just relying on our traditional wellbeing initiatives. So a traditional wellbeing initiative is something like a cycle to work scheme. Maybe you might have quite a progressive office where they have office yoga or something like that. Or it could be other things like healthcare or discounted gym membership. So that's sort of what we think of as being like a traditional wellbeing offering for an employer. But what we know about those opt-in things is that around 15%, up to about 20–21% is a really good level of uptake amongst employees for those initiatives. Which obviously means that you're leaving behind 75–80% of your workforce who are not directly benefiting from having those initiatives in place. Whereas if you design a building to take into account health and well-being for everybody in that space, then you're positively impacting 100% of the people who come into that building. So it takes it away from being an opt-in experience to something which should leave your staff better off than had they been working in a building that wasn't designed in that way. Just a quick canter through for those of you that don't know anything about Well or Fitwell. These are certification standards. So if you're familiar with something like BREEAM, then the Well Building Standards structure and format would be quite familiar to you. It's based on what we call 10 concepts. And some of those, again, very familiar to us with all of our BCO standards and BREEAM and so on. So things like air quality, thermal comfort and light. But it takes a much deeper look into things like community. Mind is the section of it which looks at mental health. And an important thing to say about the Well Building Standard is that around half of it is to do with the physical environment of the building. So the things that we as the design and construction team can directly impact. And then around half of it is to do with the way that that building is operated and the organisation's policies and procedures within the space. So things like leave for mental health issues, support for substance abuse issues, or if you're in a caring role, how your employer can support you. But lots and lots of things about how the design of the workplace can support good mental health as well. And so I've drawn a lot of what I'm saying today out of features of the Well Building Standard. Fitwell, as I said, came out slightly later, 2017. The boxes in the centre are the health categories within Fitwell and the things that it aims to do, which is increasing physical activity, promoting safety, supporting social equity and all kinds of things that you wouldn't really find in other standards. And that is a 3-star rating. And one of the important differences between Well and Fitwell is that Fitwell can be applied to any building, no matter its age, no matter its demographic, its location. It's a points-based system, and so it doesn't preclude any building from participating. And one of the challenges that we can find with the Well Building Standard is that even though it's very, very thorough and is really excellent standard, some older buildings might be negatively affected in the scoring, because unless you're doing a wholesale refurbishment, say, of mechanical and electrical systems, you can find it quite tricky to comply with some of the requirements. Whereas Fitwell doesn't require that. It has its points. You can get the points from any part of the standard. So if you're quite poor on natural light, you could make up the points by doing really well with opportunities for exercise and physical activity. So that's all I'm going to say about the standards. If you've got any questions about those, then please do ask me. We're leading consultants in wellbeing standards. We do well certification standards for clients like Nike. We're working with the Bank of England on looking at Fitwell principles and all kinds of clients like this. So as well as smaller clients, developers, operators. So get in touch if you've got any questions on that. So where to start with mental health? I think this is a definition that I really like. It's from the World Health Organization. And it talks about mental health as being a state of well-being in which an individual can realize their abilities, can cope with normal everyday stresses, can work productively and fruitfully, and is also able to make a contribution to the community. And I think if anybody here has ever struggled with mental health issues, then one of the really strong signals that mental health is suffering is that we tend to struggle with one or more of those areas. And that can be a real red flag that this is something that we really need to take seriously and start to look at. Research by the BCO, interestingly, has shown that employers have a really significant part to play in this. So they found that 99% of UK employers expect their employees to be high performing, and 98% are expected to display creativity and innovation. But at the same time, 96% of employees are expected to be relaxed and stress-free. And so I think those statistics are really quite interesting, that employees are expected to have quite a lot going on there to be both high performing, creative and innovative, but yet also relaxed and stress free. And so I think there's a really strong argument there that employers ought to be doing a great deal to support that ability to be relaxed and stress free. And we do know that poor mental health in the UK costs employers around £30 billion a year through lost productivity and absenteeism and also presenteeism. So if anybody doesn't know what presenteeism is, it's basically that feeling where you're sitting at your desk staring at the screen but not actually doing anything productive at all. So you're attending work but you're not doing anything productive, and I think lots of us have identified with that feeling before. So there's 6 things that I'd like to take you through to look at mental health in the built environment. And these are sort of broadly aligned with the NHS's and Mind and lots of other charities, 5 ways, but I've added one as well. So I'm going to look at activity, I'm going to look at social connections, I'm going to look at focus and the ability to focus. Number 4, I'm going to look at rest and recovery. Then looking at the building as a safe haven and feelings of safety. And then finally, we're going to take a look at joy and the much ignored, I think, aspect of delight, joy and playfulness in buildings. Okay, so the first slide is on activity. So we know through huge numbers of academic studies that physical activity is proven to significantly improve mental health. Studies show that it reduces instances of depression and depressive illness, and it can help to manage intrusive or obsessive thoughts and instances of anxiety. So we know as well that activity improves sleep quality, it boosts blood flow, it gets our muscles moving, it improves things like back pain and other underlying health conditions which can have a knock-on impact to our mental health. So the NHS and lots of other organisations advise that 30 minutes a day, 5 times a week, is the ideal level of exercise. And when they say that, what they mean is something that leaves you a little warmer and breathing a little heavier, but you should still be able to comfortably hold a conversation. It shouldn't leave you hot and sweaty. We're not talking about a spinning class, for example. We're just talking about something that gets you warm, gets you moving. So how can we support this in the working day? So one really crucial way that we can support it is through walking meetings. We know that the average worker sits for 9.5 hours a day, which is 2 hours more than sleep. So we know that we're sitting on our bums for much longer than we are sleeping, and that has significant knock-on effects for our health, both physically and mentally. And walking meetings are something that has completely changed the way that I have meetings, and I recommend to everybody that you give this a go. And I think particularly now in the time of post-COVID returning to work, I think getting out of an enclosed environment, out into the fresh air and being able to walk can be a significant boost to people's health. I mean, people who we know were big fans or are big fans of walking meetings are Steve Jobs, Mark Zuckerberg, Barack Obama, are all known to be big fans of going for walking meetings. And this can be a really great benefit for the workplace as well, because it can reduce pressure on meeting rooms, which is always one of those things that people in offices complain about, is lack of availability of meeting rooms. But we know as well that taking a walking meeting has lots of other knock-on benefits. It's shown to reduce the hierarchy and improve connections at work, because when we walk and talk, it reduces a lot of that hierarchical relationships. It provides inspiration. It changes the way that we think, getting out of 4 walls and out and having the sky above us. And I definitely encourage you to do that if you can. So there's a brilliant TED talk I'd like to refer you to by a lady called Nilofer Merchant. So she's a Silicon Valley executive, worked for Apple and Adobe and Symantec. And she's got this great TED talk called Got a Meeting, Take a Walk. And she talks exactly about these effects and the brilliance of walking meetings. So how can we support that? at work. So one way is by producing maps of walking routes. And it's so simple. And I tend to find with my clients that very many people that work in offices, particularly if they work in an office that they drive to, do not know about the walking routes around their workplace, around their offices. And so just doing a little bit of research and producing maps for people that show maybe a 15-minute, a half hour, maybe a 45-minute route that is safe and potentially traffic free, that might take in maybe some local landmarks or parks, and just provide people an opportunity to see where they can go for a nice contained route that's going to get them out of the office. And then things as well like providing umbrellas in case it's raining, to encourage people to go out at lunchtime and get a sandwich or just go out for that walk and take a walking meeting is just brilliant. Other things that we can do as well are, one of the really obvious things is providing facilities at the office for people to take part in exercise during the day. So if you look at your office space, can you honestly say that it's a place that supports somebody going for a run at lunchtime? You know, are there sufficient showers when they get back? Are there sufficient lockers that if they've got wet, smelly kit, or if they've got a wet towel from having had a shower, is there somewhere where they can put that stuff that then doesn't cause a nuisance for everybody else in the office? And, you know, how is that advertised? How is it promoted? Does your office have a culture as well of allowing people to take those breaks? So within the facility itself, looking at the amenities that people can have access to, or potentially if your office itself doesn't have that, what local facilities like local leisure centres, local gyms, might you be able to negotiate an arrangement with to allow your staff to use the facilities there? And looking as well at furniture and movement during the day. So standing desks, we know that they are, or can be, if well managed, a brilliant tool for getting people moving during the day. And getting people standing up improves their overall health, but it improves energy levels as well and productivity. So a study that was done in the States called the Take a Stand Project studied people using standing desks over a 7-week period. And they found that 87% of people using standing desks reported an improvement in their energy and concentration levels throughout the day, and an improvement in their mood as well. So when they moved back to their old desks after the study, they continued to be monitored and very quickly returned to their previous mood levels before the study took place. And so this is something that's definitely worth thinking about. Equally, if you can see from this picture, you know, this guy has felt pretty free to kick off his shoes. Obviously there's going to be some issues around whether or not people are happy their neighbours are happy with people taking their shoes off, but there are all sorts of things that we do need to think about as a knock-on with standing desks. We need to be teaching people how to use them. We need to be encouraging the right dress code. You know, there's no point having standing desks if people are standing there in, you know, crippling high heels. It does need to be something that's embraced within the office culture and supported. So number 2 is connection. So I'd like to move you down now to the polls. Some of you have already done them, which is great. But in each of the sections, I've got a question here, and it would be really lovely to see your answers. So there was one on activities. Does your employer provide enough activity facilities in the office to support you if you want to take part in physical activities? I'd love to know that. And here on community, do you believe that your workplace fosters a strong sense of community? That would be really interesting to find out too. And in every section, I'll refer you onto those polls. In connection, one thing that we know, again, from research that's been carried out, is that the UK, sadly, is the loneliest place to live in Europe. That was by research carried out from the Mental Health Foundation in a study called The Lonely Society. And as studies have shown that social connection is actually a greater determinant of overall health than things like obesity, smoking, and blood pressure. And the effect of loneliness can be as bad on your health as smoking 15 cigarettes a day in a study by the Royal College of Nursing. So one really powerful thing that employers can do to improve connection is to provide decent space that encourages and supports good community integration. So that might be where people can sit and chat together, but it also might be a place where people can sit and be in company whilst working alone, because we know from studies that even being around other people, even if you're not directly interacting with them, being around them can be a real boost to people's mood and motivation to get working. Moving on to our next slide. There are some things you can do, providing really good quality breakout space where people can have conversations one-to-one, but also where they can have fun and they're encouraged to use those spaces. Thinking about adjacencies is very important here as well, because I have seen some offices where breakout spaces and things like pool tables or game stations are located very close to desks where people are working, and we're going to come on in a later section onto focus and about how important focus is. So we really need to think about adjacencies and acoustics, making sure that those social spaces are located correctly within the office, but really encouraging people to get involved with one another and have those lovely serendipitous meetings where people can have a little chat and break up their working day, in particular getting away from screens. So I would encourage you that if you have breakout areas, that during lunch times or during particular protected times during the day, that you might encourage people not to take technology like phones or devices into those breakout spaces. Another way of supporting connections at work is to provide spaces that are really well thought through for intimate conversations, whereby if employees and managers and staff need to have difficult conversations, that there are spaces they can go to that support that. And this is, for me, incredibly interesting. For the last few offices that I've worked in, they have not supported that at all. So if you're having a difficult conversation that you don't want to be overlooked, it's very, very hard to find somewhere. And actually you end up having to potentially go and find a coffee shop or find, talk in the corridor, or maybe even go for a walking meeting. But even then you're not necessarily not being overheard. So think carefully about, particularly if you know that employees are going through a difficult time and it's likely that they are going to need to have some conversations where they're supported by managers and other staff members. Think about where that place could be. And you can use lots of these meeting rooms at the moment that we design in are fully glazed, but you can post fit out, put in curtains and privacy screens and things that just enable people to have a safe space to retreat to think about, to have those sorts of conversations. So moving on to number 3, again, as I say, there is a poll below. I'd like to know whether or not you feel that your workplace is an environment where you can adequately focus. And during lockdown, you might think of your workplace as being your home, or you might think of your workplace as being your office. That's up to you how you answer that question. But do you feel that your workplace is an environment where you can adequately focus on the work in hand? So some things that we know about focus, taken particularly from the Well Building Standard, is that noise is a really significant contributor to stress, particularly in the workplace. Studies published in the British Journal of Psychology asked workers to carry out different sets of tasks with different levels of noise, and they found that there was a really strong correlation between the noise of a high level of noise from a usual working office environment, and then a more controlled level of noise where people were able to focus. Not too quiet, not too loud, but a nice steady level of low background noise, which enabled people to be productive and reduce stress. Other studies, and one done by the BCO, showed that actually it monitored stress levels like blood pressure and increased heart rate, and found that when noise was reduced and people were better able to focus, that those stress indicators reduced by almost 30%. So we can see, particularly when we start thinking about the neurodiverse workforce, which is a really interesting conversation at the moment, thinking about people who process information in different ways and potentially can be highly stressed by too much noise in their environment or too much stimulation. So there are loads of different ways that we can support this. On this picture, I've shown some built-in booths here, which are specifically set aside for focus. It can be a furniture solution, and this is very, lots of offices now that are carrying out fit-outs have these sorts of acoustic pods that allow people to retreat while still being physically present in the office. And then the picture bottom left shows again a sort of cordoned off quiet area within a larger floor plate. So that's an area that you could actually assign as being a quiet working area, and allowing people to come and go with their devices so that they can focus on tasks that particularly need concentration in an environment that supports that, and then making sure that the culture of the office supports that too. This slide is showing a meeting room being used for yoga and mindfulness practices. This is something that is targeted within Fitwell and the Well Building, is provision of a space within an office that can be used for well-being activities. And we know that mindfulness is an incredibly powerful tool. It's recommended by NICE, which is the Institute of Clinical Excellence in the UK. Mindfulness is recommended as being a tool that is very, very powerful for reducing anxiety, reducing instances of depression, and improving brainwave activity and allowing people to be in a better state of calm and concentration. So encouraging mindfulness in the workplace can be a very effective and practically free tool depending on what you use. There's lots of free resources out there, and I can list those for you later if you like. But providing a space within the office that allows people to get together in a calm environment. So thinking about flexible furniture that can be folded, pushed to one side, providing maybe mats or equipment within the workplace, again, that requires a little storage, but doesn't fully take over, and thinking about how we can use our facilities to really encourage these activities. Moving on now to rest. So I have got a question for you in the poll, which is slightly, which is slightly an interesting one for most people. So rest. Do you think that your employer would support short naps at work? So this is something that's really very trendy at the moment. It's very popular in Japan and in Silicon Valley, is the idea of being able to take naps at work. So I'm going to come on to that a little bit later. I think that in the first instance, it's really important to talk about light and daylight. So a lot of you on the call will know about the term circadian rhythms, some of you won't. So the circadian rhythm is something that all of us have. It's over 6 million years of human evolution. We have learnt to connect our body's systems to the environment around us, which is heavily influenced by daylight. And you can see this photograph here shows a time lapse of the sun tracking across the sky and shows the changing light quality throughout the course of a day. And so what we can see is that in the middle of the day, so very early in the morning, in the middle of the day, the blue quality of the light really primes us for focus and concentration. But the yellow quality of light towards the end of the day is something that starts to get our hormones primed and our body primed for rest and for relaxation and recovery. So we have discovered over recent years, I kind of call this ancient wisdom but new knowledge. What we know, certainly what I've experienced, is that in most office environments, the light quality tends to be in quite a strong blue phase. Now, that's because we know that blue quality light is great for concentration and focus, but we cannot sustain that level during the entire working day. And we find that at the end of the day, I'm sure some of you will identify, you can end up leaving the office and going out into the evening feeling exhausted physically, but frazzled and like you can't switch off mentally. Your brain is still working at 100 miles an hour. And you certainly don't feel like you're ready to then rest and relax. And another thing that is an indicator of this that I'm sure you'll all be familiar with is that when we go into bars, nightclubs, social environments, the light tends to be dimmer. It tends to be more in the yellowy orange phase, because that's when we're in our storytelling phase, our social community type of mental processing. And so what that means is that we can work with this to start thinking about how people can be more productive and can get better rest as a result of the light quality during their day. So what I've indicated here is there are some technological solutions, there are some really fancy gadgets, there are some amazing things that you can do to play with the circadian rhythm and to tune light so that almost imperceptibly through the course of a day, the light might go from bright blue in the morning and early afternoon through to a slightly more yellow orangey colour later on in the day. And that won't make people feel tired, but it will allow their hormones to regulate better so that they're then able to wind down and switch off better at the end of the day. So you can think about employing some of those tunable lighting or circadian light boxes. That's one technological solution. But another solution as well is just thinking about the layout of our office and simply looking at the way that we're using that precious commodity of daylight coming into our space. So I've got two pictures here of how not to do it, unfortunately. We see in the photograph on the left that actually the workers are not getting the best benefit of the daylight at all. They are right on the interior of the office floor plate, and actually just our occasional seating, which has nobody in it, is getting all the benefit of the daylight. So what we ought to be doing is pushing all of our desking up to the windows, making sure that we've got really great benefit for those people who are sitting at their desks from that light. And again, the picture on the right shows again another crime that we quite often see in interior architecture, which is that we put all of the meeting rooms, which are used occasionally, around the perimeter, benefiting from the very best light and views, and then our poor workers who are sitting for 9.5 hours at their desk are on the inside of the floor plate with no access to that daylight. So reversing that is really important, putting those occasional meeting rooms on the inside of the floor plate and making sure that the desking benefits from all that great daylight. Here is something that's a little bit more trendy. As I said in the poll, would your employer encourage you to take a nap at work? Because what we know from organisations like NASA and the Mayo Clinic is that actually having a nap at work can be an incredibly powerful way to improve your mental health and to improve your energy levels and boost your mood throughout the day. Sadly, we know that only 1 in 3 workers take their lunch break, and the remainder either eat at their desks or they don't take any break at all during the workday. And in the UK, workers on average only take 27 minutes of their allotted lunch break and then get straight back to their desks. But we really at work now, knowing the new science around rest and recuperation, that periods of rest are as important to energy, mood and productivity as periods of work. Employers need to be grabbing hold of that science and really encouraging people to take their breaks, to take what we call macro breaks, which are things like lunch breaks, days off, even making sure that people take their annual leave, because lots of people don't even do that. But during the day that they take micro breaks as well, and encouraging people to properly rest. So we've got all technology, Emma mentioned some of it earlier, these fantastic technology like nap pods, which is where people lie down and are encouraged to rest, maybe with music and headphones or covers over their eyes, just to take a small break. How long to do it for differs depending on which study you look at. NASA recommends that 26 minutes is the optimum time. Mayo Clinic recommends between 10 and 20 minutes is a great time for a nap. It really will depend on the person, their age, their physical fitness, their diet, their sleep patterns. It's really a trial and error exercise to see what is your optimum break time to go and have a proper rest away from technology in an environment like this without coming back feeling groggy. But we know that a proper nap during the workday improves alertness by 34% on average. That was a study done by NASA. So I really encourage you to take a look at this. This is something that really isn't going away and can definitely support people's health at work. Safe haven. So number 5, we're almost there. We're on number 5. Do you believe that your office acts as a safe haven? The picture that I'm showing you here is showing a concept that has been around for a long time. It's a concept called prospect and refuge. And this is known to be something which human beings have evolved to find as their ideal environment. So the concept says that we as human beings, in order to feel safe, need to have both prospect, which is the ability to look out over an open environment, to take a look at opportunities for food, maybe approaching danger, and also be able to very quickly access refuge, so a place of safety for us. But when we look at offices and the way that offices are designed, see the historic picture on the right hand side and a very, very common picture from an office on the left, they're absolutely full of prospect. So this is very good for managers, being able to keep an eye on people and look out over the floor plate. It's also very good for efficiency, you know, sticking people in very efficient rows, like in a factory. But it doesn't offer the psychological safety of refuge. You can't see anywhere where you can safely go to get away from all of that stress and being overlooked. So making sure that we think carefully about places where people can escape, little hidey holes where they can just get away from view of people, whoever it may be, where they can genuinely relax away from devices as well as maybe with them. I'm coming on to I've covered focus earlier, that having these spaces can double up. So being very clear when you provide these spaces what they're for is important. So the picture on the right is the sort of environment that you would say, don't bring your devices to. This is a space that is digital detox, just for rest and recuperation. On the left, obviously, this could be used for good focused working. And I can't mention safe havens without talking about COVID and the return to the workplace. So obvious, this is a study, a McKinsey & Co study, which is talking about signs of distress related to COVID-19. It is based in America, but I think we can assume that it's going to be pretty much the same in the UK and Europe as well. And what we see here is that a very large percentage of the population is struggling with moderate to high levels of distress, and actually have recently experienced symptoms of mental distress and depression and anxiety, things like the use of drugs, the use of alcohol to self-soothe and self-medicate. And this is something that employers need to be aware of. The current narrative around COVID is really causing a lot of people, it's triggering a lot of mental health issues with people and a lot more anxiety. So I'm not going to dwell on this for too long, because I think a huge amount of this is down to the individual employer, but I'm working with some of my clients about how we can prepare the workplace for people's health and well-being post-COVID. And there are all sorts of things that we can do. Primarily hand washing. You know, the message about hand washing is so important. I would voice some caution here that the use of antibacterial agents should really only be short term. We know, there's lots of research that is linked in the well building standard that actually long-term use of antibacterial agents can actually trigger lots of skin conditions and potentially respiratory conditions as well. So we ought to be limiting those uses only to times when it's really necessary, not over the long-term period for years and years. Cleaning products as well, and making sure that we are communicating well with our employees what we are doing to help them, to give them a sense of safety in the workplace, and putting in place relatively low cost things like devices that can help with low touch of surfaces, as well. Thinking about air filtration, thinking about visual cues that can encourage people to feel safer in their environment, showing that the employer is really taking their health and safety seriously is definitely something that needs to be communicated to employees. But as I say, this is purely focused on the built environment, this talk, not operational policies and so on. So I can have a conversation about that another time. And then finally, my favourite section of this talk is joy, which is something that we really don't talk about that much in the office, and is a massive shame. We all leave our inner child at the door when we come to work, in this idea that at work we have to be professional and grown up, and that really only kids are involved in joy and joking and fun. So this slide, I'm afraid, is completely plagiarised from this wonderful book, Joyful, which I think Saskia's on the call, and she was the one that first put me onto this. She's the one who first put me onto this book. So Ingrid Fettel-Lee was the author. She has got an amazing TED Talk, which I definitely encourage you to look at. And she did loads of research about the impact of joy and delight. So we don't mean happiness, which is a longer term issue. We're talking about moments of joy that can spark joy and inspiration in people in the short term. And this is something that there are certain things that we know as the human experience are universal in joy. So things like bright colours, a connection to nature, the idea of something spiritual and bigger than ourselves. Round shapes as well, interestingly, seem to be very soothing, and a sense of freedom as well, and play. So silliness, and you know, my little googly eyes there on the tree. So if these are the things that we know bring people joy and elevate their day and lift their mood, then why is it that we create workplaces that look like this? And the places where we send people to heal and recover look like this. It just makes no sense at all and goes fully against our human psychology, and all the things that we know help us. So there's now a discipline called healing architecture, which looks at the design of hospitals. And we know that in hospital rooms that are designed to be beautiful and playful and bright and colourful, instances of self-reported pain, so levels of self-reported pain, are lower, and turnaround is quicker, in that people recover quicker and are discharged home quicker. So these are sorts of examples of colourful, joyful design that bring in elements of playfulness into all sorts of different environments. The hospital picture at the top there is from Sheffield Children's Hospital. At the bottom on the right is the Disney store headquarters. So these are just some examples of working environments. The picture on the top right is a bank in Japan. All of their branches they designed to be bright and colourful and playful. We've got King Games on the left hand side, and then Bumble's headquarters in Texas at the bottom. These colours and surprises and interesting shapes are brilliant ways of boosting people's moods and encouraging social interaction. So it's really something that we ought to take seriously in our designs. Finally, a brilliant quote, I think, from Winston Churchill: "We shape our buildings and thereafter they shape us." And I think this is something that I would like to leave you on now. So thank you very much for listening. If you want to get in touch with all of us, I'm going to go through some questions now. We've got a few minutes, but I'm going to leave this slide up because I want to just check that you've all got our details. So we've got Element 4, that's my business. I'm the Managing Director of Element 4. We've got Welltek, which is Emma, who you heard from earlier. Those are her details there. And the Mental Health Foundation, who is running the Mental Health Awareness Week. They've got some really great initiatives going on that you could get involved in. Okay, so I'm going to just scroll down and see whether there are any questions. John, can you tell us the book and the author again? Yes, here you go. Joyful by Ingrid Fettel-Lee.
I think it's working now, the technology, so I don't think I can...
You got it, John?
Yeah.
So there's a question come up for Emma. Hi, Emma. You all right? Hello. Oh, fantastic. Excellent. We'll switch off our plan B.
That's a very good question.
Emma, so Saskia's asked, how do you see enclosed nap pods being used in the post-COVID world, germ-wise?
I
can't hear you, Emma, if you can hear me.
Everyone else can... Apparently everyone else can hear me. Yeah, it's just you.
Can anybody hear Emma?
I'll answer the phone because then you can hear me as well.
Everyone says that they can. It's just me. It's just me. I can't hear you. Sorry. Okay.
Sorry, I think now there's a bit of feedback with both of us on, but let's try this. Okay. I'm just going to turn the volume right down on my phone so you can hear me, and then everybody can hear me.
How do you see them working post-COVID?
The actual sleep pods that we promote are completely washable inside and out. They have a vinyl bed inside, and the cover is completely vinyl as well. So and you can also spray the fabric that are on any fabric that would be on the inside. So in terms of the sleep pods, I think that's quite well managed. I was going to mention the same as well, actually, with the nap pods. That's a neuron activation pod that you saw the NHS nurse using. The bed itself, although historically it's been with fabric, it can be specified in vinyl. Obviously, that's very easy to clean, and we've been working quite a lot actually with our friends at Framery, who are the big market leader in the acoustic pods, and they have found a way of completely cleaning the felt on the inside of the pod. So that would be the same whether it's the pod you go into for silence, let's say a sleep pod, or a nap. So I think it would just have to be that cleaning afterwards. And I did want to just mention it actually, that I think the Framery O could actually help. I think I mentioned it earlier, but it could actually help a little bit as well with social distancing. They're only 1 meter by 1 meter. That's not a sleep pod, obviously. That's more of a phone booth, but still allows people to have a little bit of time out.
Brilliant, thank you, Emma. I've got a question here from Veronica. So many people might have to work flexible hours in order to reduce number of people at the office at one time or avoid the commute. How can we make their circadian rhythms? How can we make sure circadian rhythms don't cause them jet lag? Yes, so it's really important to be aware of the circadian rhythm, and the best way to set your circadian rhythm and make sure your body stays in the right rhythm is to get out into the daylight as much as possible. So every opportunity that you have for a cup of tea or a breather from your screen, try and get outside, even if it's raining, because your body just needs to check in at the right time to keep itself in the right rhythm. You'll find when you check guidance about how to avoid jet lag that they say the same thing, that you need to get out into the daylight as much as possible. So if you're coming from an airport going to your hotel, you ought to have a walk around the block to get yourself programmed within that daylight to try and keep your mind and your body in sync. One thing about that is that I do think it's really important during lockdown. I don't know whether you found, but my commute used to be almost the only time that I did go outside. And so now I'm not having my commute. I am finding that I'm suffering with my sleep quality. And I really do think that on days when I don't get outside, it affects me and affects my quality of sleep. So I've had another question from Sean. It's quite a long question, Sean. Thank you for that. Clients view well and fit well as an aspirational goal. That's true. Fit well is much more cost effective and I think easy to implement than well building. So I would definitely encourage clients, if they feel like well is outside of their reach, to take a look at fit well. Putting this to one side, employee occupant experience. How can we drive standards towards a wider audience on new build and renovation projects? Well, hopefully things like this, you know, driving. I do loads of CPD talks about it, and I do think the conversation is out there more now. People tend to be at least aware that they exist. How do you feel the standards can be used to create guidelines to improve running workplaces while employers need to convince employees to return to work post-COVID? So I'm doing some work with clients at the moment about well-being standards for the future and how they can apply the lessons from well and fit well to post-COVID to workplace design without going for necessarily full certification. And all the things I've talked about are really, really relevant. One thing that's come up in scientific studies in the last few weeks is that viruses and bacteria are very sensitive to daylight. So even in that instance, there's a great synergy there between driving daylight into your spaces and having a better, healthier environment internally. But hand washing has got to be the number one thing. It's so simple, but we know that almost half of people do not wash their hands when they've used the toilet. So God knows how many times they wash their hands during the working day and after they've touched various things. We need to encourage people to wash their hands more, and that's the single biggest thing that people can do. Yes, yuck, Selvi, I agree with you.
I just say, as the hospitals that
we're basically
to, I have the list now.
59 minutes now. We've come to the end of our
we have
time.
lent
So thank you so much.
the pods to UCL, London, Whipps Cross, 2 to West Midlands, and Barts, and then so they were the hospitals that we've lent these mattresses that kind of enforce the meditative state. Really, that's what the neurosonic technology does. So yeah, it helps you sleep as well.
Well, I've been in them. I've been in that nap pod, and it's amazing. So definitely does. Yeah. Okay, so thank you so much, everybody, for attending. It's been lovely to see you. Please feel free to get in touch with any further questions, either through LinkedIn, or you can get our contact details through the website. Take care, and have a healthy rest of lockdown and a healthy return to work. Bye-bye.